Hello, and welcome to the annual conference statistics training. This training is going to walk you through the various aspects of the AC Stats collection system. You will see how to set up your conference to prepare for a new stats year. This includes importing your data, reviewing your churches, editing and entering your conference questions, testing as if a church is entering their data, and opening the stats year. In addition, we will show you how a church will log into AC Stats, enter their data, and submit their report. Finally, we will review reporting and how you will officially submit your stats to GCFA. Will?
This is the AC Stats login screen. So here you will type in your email and password you were sent. Once you log in, the first screen you're going to see is the conference dashboard. And at quick glance, we can see on the conference dashboard that the year is open for the conferences and that right now it is currently closed for the local churches. Another thing we can see is that we see our managing year at the center of the screen, also in the top left. And we're going to see the conference name. So right now we're using our demo conference. And then all the way to the right side where it says managing year, we see the managing year again. And with this managing year, it's a drop down. So you can click the drop down and then select a previous year, and you can go back and get the previous year's data that way, or just look at what churches entered in historical years. Next to that, we can see the need help. So when you come in for the first time as the conference, you can click on the need help, and you guys will have the ability to edit. So you can click the edit button at the bottom of that and then type in your name, the number that they need to contact if a church has an issue, and then or the email as well. So once you do log in for the first time and we're getting ready to set up the year, the first thing you'll want to do is make sure all your conference and district users are there. And then you'll go there by going to security and settings. And then from that drop down, you can see user account management. When you're at user account management, you'll look and see all your conference and district users. I am excluding church users because once a church user does log in for the first time using that default GCNO and password that you assign, then they will show up in the user account management, but until that happens, they won't. So as of now, we'll just talk about conference and district users and setting them up. So we will go and create a new user at the top left using the green new user button. You'll type in that user's password. You'll put in their name. And then you can put in their roles for make a district user. So it's very important that everything that has an asterisk next to it is filled in. Once you create your new user, you can see down below that they have been created. If you have a user that you realize maybe the name was misspelled, incorrect email put in, there was a typo somewhere, you can click on that user's name in blue. And a pop-up will appear with all the information. You can then correct the email if there was a typo, maybe the name as well. We can correct the name. Here you can also help the person out and change the password. So when you click change password, it'll pop up and prompt you to put in the password and then confirm it again. So if you need to make any edits, you can always just click the person's name in blue. And then once you make your edits, make sure you hit save at the bottom right. Once you've made sure all your conference and district users are showing up, then we are ready to start importing the data so we can start going through and opening up the year for the local churches. So to import the data, we go to security and settings, drop down again, and import from GCFA core data. Here, it's very important that if you did look at historical data, that the managing year at the top right does match the active year. So the active year is going to be what is displayed right here on the import page. And so just making sure that it links up or matches what's also displaying in the top right dropdown. We see our conference as well. And then at the very bottom, we see import conference data, import district data, and import church data. So with these three buttons, you will want to click or go through all of them. Best to work from left to right. And you can do this as many times as you need to. So we'll start and we can see that for each one, it will let us know that the data was successfully imported on over. And with that, all three have been imported. So we can go back to the administration dropdown and then conference dashboard. Now that we've imported the data, we're able to really get started on opening up the year for local churches. Before I start going into the checkboxes, which I call these the checkboxes, blue boxes that we'll see on the left side of the screen, I want to talk about the right side a little. So the right side is going to give you some information on maybe what's going on in the conference, kind of more the makeup of the conference. As we can see at the top, we see how many churches we have in our demo conference, districts, and just below that, we can see the activity of our conference. We can see how many churches have started but not submitted any stats. We can see how many churches would have submitted statistics as well. And scrolling all the way down, you can see we have pie charts. So a better graphic representation of the process of the churches and the activity and where they're at as well. And to get to this on the right side of the screen, in case you do click off, you can always click the top one. It'll bring you right back. So these top two boxes are mainly for informational reason. So I'm not going too in depth on those. We're really going to focus on opening up the year for local churches, and that will take place with local churches review all. So this is where we're going to get started. Here, we are going to review all the churches that should be reporting in our conference. We'll have here a number or the number of churches in our conference, and then down below that, the list of them all. And this is where you're going to want to verify that the churches that should be reporting are reporting, even if they did close, if they closed partway through the year, then they will still need to be showing up here in red lettering in all caps it will say closed. But if you need to do that or have them there to remove membership, if they close partway through the year, then they may have some operating expense, things along those lines. And then you'll want to make sure that they are showing up in this list. To make it easier, you can also sort by at the top, drop down, and sort by submission date, district, or you can filter also by district. So you're only looking at select districts, breaking it out. And when it comes to wanting to get in an Excel spreadsheet, maybe to run some formulas, you can do that with the downloads. So with downloads, it's whatever it will put in a spreadsheet, whatever is in the list down below. So if you did filter it by district, it will only show those churches in that district. And if you don't have any filters, it will put in all the churches for that spreadsheet. So with downloads, you have church details, which will put in a spreadsheet the church address, the email, things along those lines, pastor. It'll have all that information. If you're looking to have the stats that are in that the church entered in, that'll be right below that one in church answers for conference. Right below that one, the church answers map to GCFA. So this is for the conferences that have custom lines, and those custom lines get mapped to GCFA lines. Then you'll want this one because the top one will show those custom lines in there. The one right below that will show just the GCFA lines and what it looks like whenever your custom lines are mapped to the GCFA lines. And the very last one, questions for conference, will be a spreadsheet with all the questions that you are asking the conferences. So that can be even including the conference custom questions and then just the GCFA questions as well, but it'll have it all in a spreadsheet. And you can download that as well. Once you are done confirming all your churches are in and that they imported correctly, you can go back to administration dropdown and conference dashboard. We will go to the next checkbox, which is set password. In here, we can set our password. And if you're an Ezra user, this is something that is very normal to you guys. It's something you guys have always had to do. So we will create our password. At the top, you can see the current password. And now we have put in a new password. This will be the default password that churches use to log in for the first time. And they'll use their 6-digit GCNO number as their username for that first time login by default. So we'll save the password. It lets us know it was successful. Now we're ready to move on to the next checkbox. Data collection setting. This is going to vary from conference to conference on what you guys would like and prefer. So with the data collection setting, here you can require or just display what churches will see once they go to submit their stats. So once they're finished entering in all their data for their stats and they hit the submit button and it goes through all the validations, everything checks out, it will be prompted to put in their name and email. By default, that will always be required. And then whatever the conference select from this page. So you can have it display the church name. You can also make it required for something to be inputted in there. So they can input the pastor name, have the EIN be required as well upon submission. And you can have notes as well. And if you are a conference that does ask a specific question to your churches whenever they submit, you can change the names for these text or these input boxes to be a question that you guys would like. Once you are done setting it up to your liking, you make sure you hit save at the very bottom. And it says it was successfully saved. And now we can go back to the conference dashboard. And we have completed the local church section of the checkboxes. And we will want to check this section off. To open up the year, we will need 3 checks. So this is our first one. We'll also have another check at the end of the question section and then the testing section. Once we have all 3 checks, then we can open up the year. So it's very important that you do go through and hit the slider to complete those reviews. Question review. Here at question review, you will want to look over all the questions that are being asked, make sure the verbiage is correct. And if anything seems off, you would like to change the verbiage, you can click on either the sort number or the line number of that question, and a pop-up will appear, and you can then go in and change the question, some of the verbiage, maybe the help details. You can also, if you need to, change the question numbering and sort order from this. So if you are moving around a lot of questions, maybe you're trying to fit in a custom question, you can do that by clicking on the name, going through the pop-up, and then changing sort order and then question number. And you can also add any validations you need to at the bottom. If you are a conference that does have custom questions, then at the top left, you'll see new question. And here is where you can start making a new custom question for your conference. At the top, you will see visible and editable. You can click it to make it hidden to the churches or where it's read only to the churches. So they'll be able to still see the line. They just won't be able to make any edits to the line. By default, for question number, it will put it at the very bottom. So it'll be the last question that is asked. And same thing with the sort order. So it will appear at the very bottom. So if you would want to see the question, you would have to go all the way to the bottom, making sure that if this is a question that goes in table 2 or something, that you change the sort order and the table number as well. The type, you will want to make sure that when you're building this out, if you're creating a whole new table, that you can have the table header. If you're building a new table or starting a whole new section for an existing table, you can break out the different sections. And so you can have the section header. Question, this is going to be a typical or normal question that you would see as whenever we went into line 1 as our demonstration to edit. That is a normal question. Right below that is total. And the totaling line would be like line 4, line 50, line 55. Those are all totaling questions, so other lines will total into it. And we will see that come into effect whenever we scroll on down this pop-up and start talking about validation. So I'll get to that in a sec. But when you're done with picking out the type of question it is a custom question that gets mapped to a GCFA line. Here is how you could map it, is some to GCFA question code. And it's just knowing the question code or line abbreviation that this would get mapped to. So if this was operating expense, we can then type in operating expense and have it mapped to operating expense. Just below that is badge type. With the badge type, if you're an Ezra user, this is something you're very familiar with, especially seeing these names. In Ezra, vital signs was green. If it was entered in by conference, it would have an orange fill. If it was portion field, it would have that dark purplish border around the cell. And if it came from an additional field, it would have that light blue fill. Here with the badges, you can select as many as you need. If you just need one, you can always select one, but if this is something that's entered in by conference and it's in a portion field, you can select two. And it also could come from an additional table. So if you're a conference that has a whole table that has been created that goes to, for example, line 47, the operating expense, you can also have that. So you could have 3 badges if you need to that question. And here we'll put in our question header at the top. And at the very bottom, you can have help details. So this is additional explanation to for the churches to provide more detail on what that question might be offering or what they may need to put into that cell. Then right below that is the validation area. So I talked about the totaling lines and what happens when you make it a totaling line, and then down below is going to be the validation section. So if you need to make something a totaling line, then it would appear in this drop-down box, the total question 2 number. And if this is a normal question, we can have it add up to that. So as I talked about with some examples, line 4 was a totaling line, 50, 55. All of these, we can have this new question add to. But it's important that if you're creating a whole new table and you're creating a total line, that you do mark it down as a total line so that it does appear in this dropdown. Other validations is error if percent variance. So this is going to be if a value from one year to the next changes by a certain percentage, whether it increases or decreases, for example, by 10%, it will give a warning, and then that church will be required to type in an explanation for why it may have changed from so much from the previous year. There is also warning 0 and error it's 0. So if you hover over the wording, it will provide you a nice explanation on what that validation will do. So for a warn of 0, if that line is 0, it will give a pop-up text box right below that line to then have the church put something in to provide an explanation on why it might be 0. And if it's an error, if that line is left blank or a 0 is put into it, they will not be able to submit until there is a value other than 0 in that one. Once you are done creating your validations, you can hit save question. And now if we go to our table 4, at the top, we can jump straight to it. We can see that new question we just created. And also, if you do see by default, when you create that custom question, it does give you the just standard reference code. You can always change that by, again, going to the line number or sort number and then typing in a new reference code. And once we hit save, we can see now that has been changed. Also, I'd like to mention when you're on the question management screen, as you see, this bar will stay with us at all times. So when we're scrolling, it will still be there. We can jump to table 2. So it's a quick way to get around. You can get all the way up to table 1 as well. Also, on the left or right side, you can see the active only. You can make sure you can see all your lines that have existed. And then even more to the right of that, you can also export all the questions that are in question management. So all the ones you may have created, you can see those, or if you're just wanting a spreadsheet of all the questions, another way of getting it would be right here. Once you're done, either changing any questions, verifying, or adding any custom questions, you can go back to the conference dashboard. And we can now start additional validations. So here at additional validations, these are total lines that need to equal each other. So line 4 needs to equal 5 and 6, 6 needs to equal 4 and 5, and so on. So here, the church will not be able to submit until lines 4, 5, and 6 all equal each other, as it was in Ezra. Big thing is lines 5 and 6 are the lines that most conferences have custom lines to. So whenever you do add your custom line to 5 or 6 in the question management, which we were just at, making sure that it is also added here in additional validations, because the system will look to see if it's there to make sure everything's added up. Because like I said, if 4, 5, and 6 do not add up to equal each other, and then the church will not be able to submit. That's very important that if you do add one, that it's added here as well, and then making sure you hit save validations. Upload answers. If you're an Ezra user, this you will know as the remittance upload. If you are a non-Ezra user, then typically you would have sent us here at GCFA a spreadsheet and we would upload it. Now you guys will have the ability to upload your file on your own, which is very big because I know in the past years there's been back and forth between me and some conferences with lines being transposed, and I didn't know the lines were transposed. And so a lot of the data was thrown off. So with this, you'll be able to upload it yourself and making sure that all the data did get put into the right church and all the data went to the correct lines, especially if you have custom lines, making sure that the data, whenever it's uploaded, is going to the correct GCFA lines as well. So with the upload, we can see right when we click into it, the bullet points of the kind of requirements of how the template should be for the upload. And right down below with the blue button, we can download the template file. So we'll go ahead and do that. With this template file, I recommend that everyone download it to look at it because it's a lot easier instead of typing in the headers or making sure it's got the correct sort order, to just have it. And then you can either take the headers and put it into your data sheet, or you can take your data and put it into the template. A lot easier that way. But to talk about the template, the first row is the line abbreviation. So this is going to be what's needed as your headers for your upload template or upload spreadsheet. You will need row 1 as your headers. Row 2, this is for the conferences that like to refer to each line by its line number. So we definitely wanted to put it in there because I do know there's several conferences that refer to each line by its line number, and there's also several that refer to the lines by their line abbreviation. So this makes it easy to identify the line that you need to upload answers into. And a big thing to note is that when you do bring over the headers or bring over your data to this, to line it up with the headers, that you only need the headers for the lines that you were trying to upload data into. So if you are looking to upload information only to line 1, this is just an example, then you'll want to delete everything from column D onward and make sure that only the header for line 1 is showing. If you don't even have information in the other headers or like below the other headers, and it still takes it in as a 0. So then you would override all the data that maybe a church has inputted if you're doing this at the end. So you want to make sure that only the headers that you are trying to upload lines into are existing. Also to note, the first column is going to be your 3-digit conference number. And then the second column, column B, will be the 6-digit GCNO number. Very important to remember that with the 6-digit GCNO number, that those leading zeros are there. So if the GCNO starts with a 0, that it is still showing up in the spreadsheet. Once you're ready, you can upload your spreadsheet. Another thing to note, it needs to be a CSV formatted file. And we'll upload it. Okay, now we can see it was successfully uploaded. So now all the data that we had in our spreadsheet has been moved into AC Stats, and we can go back to the conference dashboard, and we have now completed the question section. So again, we will hit the slider and make sure we get our checkbox. Now we're ready to start the testing section. So here with the testing section, you guys at conference are given a test church. So it's not a real GCNO. It just says test church. And this is where you're able to go in and kind of see what a church would see and test out, making sure all the lines work correctly. And you can do this without actually having to go into a live church. So we can scroll on down. Here at the top, we can see instructions. So when you click instructions, give you brief instructions on actually going through the stats, question help, everything along those lines. What happens whenever you go to submit your report, how it validates the answers. Next to that, you have the print. So you can print out the church report. So it just has a church name and all its information at the top. And if you're doing this before you've ever entered in any stats, then it will give you blanks for the 2022 stats year. So the current stats year that we are on, which is 2022, and it will still include the previous stats year. So currently would be the 2021. Also, if you hit the drop down, you can print out a blank report. So this will be a report that you print that doesn't have any church name. Everything's blank within it. So you can just have a nice blank slate to start creating and typing in answers if you need. Next to that, local church details. So this will take you to the local churches page. As you know, this is a test church, so there's not much church details to it. In this box below, this will be what it looks like for a local church testing it out. And you can test it out by typing in something that you would like to leave a note for that church. And this was going to appear whenever we go into an actual local church, but you can always test it out in this test church, see what it would look like and how it's going to be presented to the actual local church. On the darker blue bar, right before we get to all of our questions, we have a display help toggle. Here you can click it, and as we can see down below in yellow, extra explanation and appears for that line. So if you scroll on down, you can see that it will appear for all the lines that have it. And if it does get too cluttered and it's a lot of words, makes also scrolling take longer, you always click it again and all of that will disappear. So it's nice, cleaner, easy to work through and read through as well. Also, we have table 1, 2, and 3 that you can jump to. And then the submit button will be at the top for stats. As you see, there is no save button, and it's not just because this is a test church, but also because this has auto save. So whenever a church is going through entering in their stats and they need to step away for a little, they can come back and pick up right where they left off without having to hit a save button. So here in this test church, you'll want to go through making sure the sort order for all your questions are correct that we handled earlier on in question management, that the verbiage is correct, and that any totaling lines are totaling up correctly. So we want to make sure maybe line 8 is totaling. We can see, okay, that is working correctly as we would like. You can go through and test out all your lines, making sure everything is displaying and working as it should. And when we are ready, we can go up to the top and then hit submit. So as it's going through its validations, as you saw, I did not go through everything. So this is what it's going to look like whenever there is an error that has occurred. And I do recommend that when you are testing out in the test church, that you do not fill some things out, or if you have a max value, you try going over that max value so you can see what it looks like and what it's and how it's going to be presented to the local church. So as we talked about before, lines 4, 5, and 6 all do need to equal each other. So we'll fix that. We can scroll on through, making sure, okay, there's another box that appeared, so we'll need to address that. And then we will keep going, making sure there is no more. And once you have verified that there's no other boxes that need to be addressed, we can go and submit again. And it'll run through its validations and then prompt us with everything was successful and we can submit report. So here we can see what we talked about earlier on, way earlier with the data collections page. As I mentioned, whenever a church goes to submit, they will be required to put in their name and email. Along with their position. The church name we just had it as displayed, so that's why there's not an asterisk next to it. Pastor name, we did have it required, and notes as well. So we'll want to make sure that we put something in there for those. If nothing is put in and it's a required field, and we try to submit, it will prompt us that we need to address that box and have a red border around it. If a church is ever not comfortable with submitting just yet, they can always go back to review their answers. But since this is our test church, we know it's correct. We can go to submit. It will let us know that we do need to submit, that once we submit, we cannot go in and make any changes until our district or conference unsubmits us. So we've submitted, lets us know that we have submitted and who submitted it. So we can always go back to our test church and we can see then the data that we entered in. As You guys, the conference can see at the top, there is a conference admin panel. This is only visible to you guys, and where you'll be able to reset a church, unsubmit the church, or make edits yourself. The local church will not see this box. So when we go in as a local church, we'll see what that looks like. Once that's done, we can go back to the conference dashboard. We tested our annual church. So now we have completed our testing, and that is our third and final checkbox. We need to open up the year. Before we open up the year, I'd like to talk about the box right below the complete testing, which is clear all church answers. This clear all button is very, very important. So if you are a conference that does like to test in live actual churches, and you want to remove all the data from all the testing you've done, if you're a conference that does trainings in churches, then this is the button that you can look for. So instead of resetting each individual church, you can always hit the clear all button. This will also clear all the answers that we just put in for our test church as well. Big thing to note is that once you open up the year, this button will not be able to be clicked anymore. It will be inactive, and that is because we don't want someone accidentally clicking it when 95% of the churches have entered in their stats, and someone accidentally clicks it and it all gets wiped out. So that'd be very bad. So when you do open up the year, this button will become inactive. So we'll get ready to open up the year. And big thing to note, when you do open up the year, you will be logged out. It's not a glitch. The system will log you out, and then you'll have to log back in. So we will go back in. So as you can see, when we log back in, that the year is open now for local churches. Does state that. So now that the year is open for local churches, we will go in and log in as a local church to see what that looks like and their point of views and everything they would have to do. So here at the login screen, we're going to have the church's 6-digit GCNO number. Again, by default, this is the first time logging in. And then the default password that we created way earlier on, and we're going to use that to log in. This is our first time logging in, so we're going to hit I'm not listed, and then everything with an asterisk we need to have something in for. Now we can type in our new password that will be associated with our email that we just put in. And this is the church details page. So as I kind of briefly touched on before about the church details page, this is what it would look like. And for a church to log in for the first time, it's going to have all their information. And at the bottom, annual report. So this is going to take them to where they need to go to start entering in stats. Also, at the top, they can hit annual statistics and it will take them there as well. So we'll go to our annual report. And as you can see, the text box, this is where if you left any notes for that church or any notes about that church, it will appear here. So kind of everything that we saw with going through the test church, we have our display help question button, all our tables, everything along those lines. Now, this is what it would look like for the conferences that upload their stats. and what it would look like even if it's a smaller section. So if you're a conference that does a remittance upload, it's going to gray out the cells that you guys have uploaded data into. And the reason it grays out is because you guys upload those values in there for a reason. You guys don't want the churches to go in there and start changing it. So if you do your upload before churches enter in their stats, this is what it's going to look like. If you are a conference that does your remittance upload after your churches have entered in stats, then this won't be a big issue. They won't see it. You'll upload it and it'll override even if they did put something in that field. But everything will be grayed out. So we can jump down and we can then go to some questions that we didn't upload any values into. So we can see what that looks like. So with that, we can see question 56, 57, and 102. Remember 102 we created. We didn't upload any values into. So this is what it would look more like whenever you upload a remittance report. You'll have your grayed out section, and then the church will go in there, and anything that wasn't uploaded into, they can still enter in values too. And sorry, push tab, so it takes us straight up to the top, but let me go back down and we can see. So 56, 57 totals to line 100A. As we can see, those do add up correctly, though that is very important to note. But now that we've gone through all our questions as our local church, we can hit submit. And once it does say everything is complete, validations, everything's checked off, now submit. And again, we get taken to the submission screen where we can type in our name, email, and then any notes that we have. Once it's no again, once we submit, we can't make changes. And now we have submitted as us, the local church. We can go back to the annual report. We can see that we've submitted, when we submitted, who submitted. We can also now print out our report that's got all our values and data in there for everything we've inputted. Again, you can still print out a blank report if you need. But since we now have a church that has submitted, we can go back to the conference. And when we scroll on down a little, we can see that we do have a church that has submitted and it's just waiting approval. We can also click on just the wording here and it will take us straight to the list of churches. So since we only have one, it will just be the one church. And here we can click on the church's name. We will go to the church's detail page. We can go to the annual report, which we can then look at the values that the church has entered in for each line. Scrolling down a little further, we can unsubmit the church in case they need to make any changes. Or if everything looks good, then we can approve the stats. Before we approve, if you do see something that the church needs to change and they're having trouble changing it, and you need to go in and kind of see what they're seeing and have the same access kind of that they would have, we have a quick access key. So with this quick access key, you can hit this box with the arrow and it will log you in as that church. And then you're able to see what the church would see and have that access. So you're able to kind of go through and help them with those troubles. So it's great also. Even if they don't need to make corrections, even if it's beforehand, they're having trouble with some totaling lines, to go in there, see what they're seeing, and help them out that way as well. And there's always a quick access key to do that. Since we've gone through this church, we know the values are correct. We can approve it. Now that it has been approved, we can scroll on down and we can see it has been approved. We can remove our approval and we can still also unsubmit the church. But going to the conference dashboard, scrolling on down, we can now see we do have a church that has submitted. Once all churches have submitted, you can then close the year. And we have successfully closed the year. And that's when you can start running your reports. So if you're an Ezra user, the Area Integrity Report, Warning Report, all these names are very familiar. And the Area Integrity Report and Warning Report, I do recommend always doing that once you close the year out. The other reports you can run during the year to try to find maybe if one church has a typo, you catch it early on. Instead of looking at everything in bulk, you're able to break it up into individual sections. However you like to do it as the conference, but I think the warnings and Area Integrity Report are best to do at the end of the year, once you've closed the year and churches cannot make any more changes. But you can run these reports to verify and validate your data. And then once you've done running those reports, everything looks good, you can submit to GCFA. So before we submit to GCFA, if you were a conference that was an Ezra user, you would have seen a checkbox to always roll up your satellite churches into the parent church. Obviously, it wasn't a requirement, but some conferences did do that. So for those conferences, you can still have the ability to roll up the satellite churches into the parent church. You can view your stats on how that would look. And then when you are ready, you can submit to GCFA. Once you have submitted to GCFA, you get a check and it lets you know that you've submitted to GCFA. So the conference stats have now been closed, so you can't make any more edits and changes as well.
Thank you so much for your time in learning our system. If you have any questions, please email us at dataservices@gcfa.org. Thank you.